Can you handle the unscheduled nature of Ecuador's power cuts? As we enter a new round of rolling blackouts and potentially water rationing here in Cuenca, I'm sharing how our family has been trying to cope with the constantly changing power cut schedule. And I'll also share the impact this has had on our business and how the real estate market has reacted to these cuts. But what has surprised me the most are the mental health implications of constantly being on edge. Vamos. Some good news. As I was editing this video, news broke out that Colombia will once again sell electricity to Ecuador. Unlike here, Colombia has had a bunch of rain which has restored their reservoirs to the point where they now have a power excess. The contract still needs to be formalized, but they could provide between 400 and 450 megawatts. Ecuador needs 1800 megawatts, so this won't put an end to the power cuts, but it should help considerably. We're expecting this to commence as early as next week, the 18th or 19th of November. I'll update in the comments when it actually commences. Now, I use the word schedule very loosely. This is probably the biggest complaint I hear throughout both the expat and local communities here in Cuenca. The government will release a schedule for the power cuts, but then they don't stick to it. This leaves us in a pretty awkward position. Maybe we're halfway through cooking lunch and then bang, out goes the power. Or maybe I'm trying to edit a video on my PC. Nope, sorry, not today. Or perhaps you even need electricity for medical reasons. I'm thinking about breathing machines like CPAPs or respirators, but also powered wheelchairs, oxygen, or even home dialysis equipment. Access to electricity can be a life and death matter. So the stakes will differ for everybody, as will how we respond to this issue. I'll get to how we and others are dealing with this issue in a minute. For now, let's get to why Ecuador is facing such significant power rationing and why scheduling the blackouts is harder than it may first appear. There are two main reasons for the power cuts. The first is the drought. Ecuador is facing its worst drought in 61 years, and this really matters because over 70% of Ecuador's power is related to hydroelectric sources. No rain equals no power. It's a pretty simple equation, really. And the second reason is maintenance, or lack thereof. Ecuador's energy infrastructure has suffered from underinvestment and deferred maintenance for years. This has created an energy system that's ill-equipped to handle the rising energy demands. The response from President Daniel Noboa was to declare a state of emergency and announce power rationing to manage the deficit. But blackouts have become longer and more frequent, with some areas experiencing up to 14 hours daily of power cuts. They have made efforts to diversify the energy mix, including increased private sector participation in power generation. However, these efforts may take years to fully come into effect. So in the meantime, the government is left with the unenviable position of rationing electricity. My first response was to be super critical of how the government handled the scheduling. It was and remains very frustrating not knowing when you'll have power. So why is it so hard to stick to a schedule? The engineer in me thinks this should be a very solvable problem until I got to some of the finer details. Every day, Ecuador's national electricity operator, CENES, is basically trying to understand how much power the grid can afford to generate. It is a balancing act with some key variables. I'm going to zero in on two main projects to illustrate the complexity. Ecuador's largest dam is the Coca-Cola Sinclair, generating up to 30% of Ecuador's electricity needs. This controversial project was the jewel in then President Correa's 2016 Electricity Master Plan. But it doesn't have a reservoir that can be used to control the flow of water, and therefore amount of electricity production on any given day. It is also plagued by poor design and construction issues, which are responsible for sediments and other buildup that requires unplanned maintenance to protect the dam. So every day they need to make educated guesses on how much electricity the current flow will produce and whether maintenance is required to prevent damage. The second project is actually a series of dams called the Paute Integral System. It's Ecuador's largest hydroelectric network, and it's the connections between the network that makes it difficult to control and predict. For example, the Mazar Dam acts as the main reservoir for the downstream plants of Porte Molina and Sopladora. So if the water levels at Mazar are low, then the downstream plants will also suffer reduced output as well. This makes it difficult to predict the day-to-day capacity and the scheduling of power cuts. Another complicating factor with this network of dams is maintenance. As it's a network, they require coordinated efforts to plan maintenance, but sometimes decisions are made to stop individual dams to conserve water. And what is the end result of all this? A problem with consistently changing variables that need to be continually reassessed. Whilst I do acknowledge the complexity of the problem, I do think the government could handle communication around scheduling a lot better. They are up for re-election soon, and it does feel like they are saying what the people want to hear, all the while knowing that their promises are unlikely to be fulfilled, at least in the short term. And I don't understand this political strategy, but then again, I really wasn't expecting Trump to win in a landslide either, so what do I know? So that is the why. Let's move on to how we are adapting. I do want to touch on something rather unexpected, and that is the emotional aspects of not knowing when you'll have power. That is coming up, so do stick around if that is of interest. For now, let's concentrate on some of the standard methods that people in Cuenca and throughout Ecuador are using to sustain at least some of their energy needs. Starting with the thing that we all seemingly can't live without, internet. Remaining connected has been the key priority for our family and many others that I know. We do a lot of work online, and so this really is mission critical for us and our business YapaTree. The easiest solution, which has worked for us well so far, is to buy a UPS or uninterruptible power supply. This has two main functions. It basically acts as a big battery that can power devices when there is no electricity from the grid. They also have built-in surge protectors to protect your expensive equipment. These are very handy to prevent electricity spikes, especially when power cuts and returns numerous times a day. How long you can remain without power really depends on the size of the battery. This one that we purchased for $72 at Grand Aki will power our modem router for over 5 hours. As each blackout generally lasts less than this, it effectively means that we can stay connected and get our work done. The laptop battery might then become the limiting factor. The main downside of these is that they are heavy. They can easily weigh over 10 kilos, making them expensive to buy and ship to Ecuador via Amazon or similar. You can buy them here in Ecuador, but it is probably the worst time to do so because the demand has far outstripped supply many times over, and I have seen prices for some items double or even triple over a few weeks. You will definitely be able to find some lower capacity UPSs here, but more expensive, higher capacity UPSs seem to be harder to find. Now I can almost hear some of you saying, but Jason, why not just hotspot your phone and use the internet connection from that? And that is definitely a valid question. I even own a little portable Wi-Fi router that uses a SIM card for this exact purpose. It has gotten me out of numerous jams during my years as a digital nomad before settling in Cuenca. But the Achilles heel is the SIM card and the fact that it needs signal from mobile phone providers. This is how it connects to the internet. And did you know that mobile phone towers can also run out of battery? I certainly didn't, but I do now. And this makes it very risky to rely on hotspotting via signals from phone towers as your primary way to get work done. The other problem with UPSs is that they can't really power that much. Ours is dedicated to powering the router modem only. Now this would be an expensive solution to try and cover any meaningful number of electronic products in our house or office. For greater capacity, I have seen quite a few people starting to pull together homemade battery solutions, like something like this. You buy a decent sine wave inverter, something like 1,000 watts plus, you buy a charger, and you hook this up to a car or truck battery that you buy in Ecuador. And now, whilst those are the basics, there is quite a bit more to it. And so if you do go down this path, you'll likely need to do a bit of research on your own. Do be sure to pay special attention to the type of battery you get. I'm certainly no expert, but I understand that regular car and truck batteries may have a limited lifespan due to the fact that they are designed to continuously recharge, not be drained by 90% and then be recharged again. If the DIY route scares you like it does me, you can buy power stations which, in addition to having batteries, can also connect to solar panels for a more complete off-grid solution. But again, these can be quite heavy, so importing them is expensive. The next step up, at least for many businesses here, is a generator. Small businesses like restaurants, bakeries, and pharmacies are opting to purchase gasoline-powered generators like this one. We have one for our office and it works pretty well for us. We mostly run the office essentials of the Wi-Fi and laptops through it, but it is not without its substantial drawbacks either. The two most obvious are noise and air pollution. For us, the whole idea is to have enough power to get some work done, but it can be pretty difficult to work with the loud sounds and smell of gasoline in the air. Walk through El Centro and you'll find lots of these generators on the outside of buildings, all chained up to prevent theft. It's far from ideal for these businesses. They're just simply doing what they can to survive. And to make matters worse, there has been some gasoline and diesel rationing in parts of the country, making it hard for businesses to even secure enough fuel to keep their generators running. So it is a difficult time to run a business in Ecuador, and I am super grateful that our business has managed to grow even through these blackouts. But we're definitely in the minority. Many businesses are really struggling to both literally and figuratively keep the lights on. One reason a real estate business has not been impacted more is because of the generators. Not these little ones, but the big diesel-powered ones that are installed in the more modern apartment buildings. Understandably, both buyers and renters are putting building generators at the top of their wish lists. This is pushing demand for these types of condos significantly. Apartment buildings with generators tend to be newer and at the higher end of the market. Exactly the type of rental that many of our expat clients tend to target anyway. So we've been able to capitalize on our strong pre-existing relationships with these buildings and landlords. But I do need to say that the demand for buildings with generators is considerably outstripping supply. So we are encouraging those looking to secure a rental to be laser focused on your needs. For example, 6 months ago, it was much easier for us to find properties that ticked most of your boxes, including generators, balconies, green space, the works. But now, if your wish list has a generator on it, then you may need to concede some other nice to haves. You can obviously hold out and try and find the absolutely perfect rental, complete with a generator, but we have seen numerous clients do this and miss out on their core need of a generator and have had to settle for something less. Now, you also need to know that there are 3 types of generators in apartment buildings. The smallest and cheapest units just have backup power for the elevators. The next step up powers elevators and common areas such as the lobby, gym, and car park lights. And the holy grail are generators that power the entire building, including inside your apartment. Be very sure to check which type of generator the building has. I'd be very wary of agents misrepresenting the type of generator available in that building. Oh, and these generators were really designed for emergency or backup use. They weren't designed to be used for several hours every day, so you can expect additional maintenance that will need to be carried out, and many buildings have started to include a diesel supplement in the HOA fees. Something between $15 and $50 extra per month is the current norm. Now, you as a tenant would normally be expected to cover this. From a buyer's point of view, I have seen several instances where this power supply issue has actually worked out in their favor. Let's say you're looking at buying a condo pre-construction. Some projects that did originally plan to only have generators that would power the elevator and common areas But now buyers are acutely aware of the importance of generators. Some projects have upgraded at no additional cost to buyers their generator to one that powers everything. So getting a little Yapa or something extra is obviously a great result for these buyers. However, these wins have been few and far between since the rolling blackouts began. As they've progressed, I've found the unscheduled nature to be somewhat of a stressor. It's only now that we have a rare day with no power interruptions that I remember how good it feels without needing to hope that power doesn't get cut when I need it the most. We have a large family, and central to our daily routines is having lunch with everybody at home. This is quite common amongst Latino families, so nothing special there. The problem is that we have an induction cooktop, and we were consistently ending up with half-cooked meals when the power would just suddenly go off. It was just really tough to plan any sort of half-decent lunch. And after a few weeks of cold meals, we decided to purchase a cheap gas cooktop and create this little outdoor kitchen. As you can see, I also bought a little Italian-style espresso maker. The amount of sheer joy that has come from having unrestricted access to hot food and coffee was really quite surprising to me. I think the inability to stick to a power cut schedule has caused this sort of ever-present feeling of being consistently on edge. Taking away the ability to plan lunches or really do anything for that matter puts you in this no man's land where you're not quite sure what to do with your time. Do I have enough time to get this piece of work done? Do I have time to edit this video? Do I have time to feed the kids? Can I sneak in one more cup of coffee before the power cuts? It's this constant re-evaluation of how much time is available at any given moment that I've struggled to come to grips with. I don't care that we can't have hot meals every day, but it would be nice to know the days that we can't. So when do things go back to normal? You're the 8th person that has asked me that question today, and I simply do not know. The only surefire way will be when the drought finishes and we get something like 15 days worth of continuous rain to replenish the dams. The government's re-election hopes also hinge upon them finding a solution to this problem, so they are working on bringing on additional sources of generation, such as renting large power generating barges, performing emergency maintenance on unused power plants to get them operational again, and increasing partnerships with the private sector. I know it will pass and we can go back to taking electricity for granted. But in the meantime, I constantly find myself reflecting on how fortunate we really are, especially in times like these. My family can deal with it because we have the means and security to do so. However, there are so many families that are truly suffering because they can't work, or their crops have failed, or they can't get enough diesel. The list goes on. So, for everybody's benefit, shall we do a little rain dance? Or would that be cultural appropriation? I do not know, but I don't want to be cancelled, so there'll be no rain dancing today. However, do feel free to tap your way over to this next video.